All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipovich Show is Dahlia Lithwick. Dahlia is, of course, a senior editor at Slate, which you can find at slate.com, where she writes frequently on matters of the law and the courts. Dahlia, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So, Dahlia, your latest piece on Slate is on former Vice President Dick Cheney and his torture book tour that he's going on right now, and it's entitled, oddly enough, "Getting Away with Torture." So, why don't you tell us all about the piece?
Well, I've been writing about torture a long time, and the one thing I didn't want to do was get into another tussle with him and his claims yet again, both in the book and in the media tour promoting the book, that torture is, quote, safe and legal and effective, and that he still supports it. I think in the book he says he would, quote, strongly support continuing to waterboard people if it could lead to actionable information. And I think the point of my piece was to just get away from this, what I think is just completely calamitous conversation about whether torture works, because I think Dick Cheney is one of about 9 people who really wants to have a conversation about whether torture works. I think the rest of us have moved on. Whether it works or not is absolutely immaterial. It's illegal. That should be the beginning, the middle, and the end of this conversation. Right,
and it seems that argument, that they want to have that be what the discussion about it is whether or not it does it work, is it legal, not even if it's legal, does it work, and that distracts people from the actual crimes, because again, there is no doubt about it, these are crimes that were committed, correct?
They're crimes under the Geneva Convention, under the UN Torture Convention. They're crimes under domestic law. There's no, I think, set of facts under which you can look at something like waterboarding and say, it's kind of on a close call whether it's torture. And not only that, but I think it's really important to just keep reminding listeners that we prosecuted and convicted people for waterboarding in World War II. It's not something we just invented. Waterboarding has been around for hundreds of years, and it's been a crime for hundreds of years. So I think that the sleight of hand here, and it's not just Cheney, it's an awful lot of the people who were the architects of the torture program, is exactly what you're describing. It's a distraction or a diversion. If we can talk about the fact that, when Jack Bauer tortures people on Fox's 24, they do divulge incredibly important ticking time bomb information, then we can really divert the conversation away from the fact that it's patently illegal. It's always been illegal. And I think to play that game with him yet again this year is a horrible, horrible mistake.
Right. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You actually go on in the piece to make what I actually feel is probably the more important point about this, that because, Cheney can go around and flaunt his crimes on television in his book, it's still to this day with no consequences, that we as a society have essentially made torture legal. Talk a little about that.
Well, I think that's the real story here, is that because the decision was made both in the Bush administration and afterwards in the Obama administration to live in this half world wherein we assert that torture is illegal, but we also assert that we're going to do nothing about the people who were tortured. We're not going to give them any civil or criminal remedies. We're not going to prosecute or even investigate the torturers, much less unspool how we became a nation of torturers. We live in this half world where we assert as a factual matter that torture is illegal and we don't do it, but the torturers get to walk around and say, no, it's not. It's clearly not a crime because look at me, I'm on a book tour. And so that was the point I really wanted to press in the article, is that you really can't both suck and blow here. If it's illegal, it's illegal. And the administration, for all sorts of pragmatic reasons, the Obama administration made the decision. They said at the time, we want to face forward, we want to turn the page. They had all these nice metaphors for why they weren't going to look backward at these things. But by failing to look backward, what they've in fact done is ratify a situation that we can't change. So we can certainly change the law to say, okay, now interrogations have to comply with the Army Field Manual again. But as long as Dick Cheney walks free and gets to say, no, you know what, it was illegal, and not only that, it worked and it saved lives. Oh, and by the way, it helped us capture Osama bin Laden. We still live in a world in which, for all intents and purposes, torture is legal.